Hello. This week on Waste Watch we're down at the Yard pursuing our inquiries. And we're here to try and discover what kind of value Britain's taxpayers are getting out of the 16 billion per annum we spend on Britain's police force. Well, I've just been moved along by the boys in blue because they don't like people filming outside Scotland Yard unless they've got a press pass. So much for citizen journalists. But at a time when we're spending £700 per British household on policing, dissatisfaction with that policing has never been higher. And since the 1960s, crime detection rates have more than halved. And a report just issued from the Metropolitan Police gives us some pretty good clues as to why that may be the case, because it provides a breakdown on how the £3.25 billion they receive actually gets spent. A number of items immediately jump off the page. The first is that the amount of money spent on routine street patrols is some way less than the amount of money spent on VIP protection and anti-terrorism. And then there's a huge amount of money spent on administrative paperwork, and that apparently relates to paperwork that is nothing to do with specific crimes, not to mention the further amount of money spent on checking paperwork. And then there's officers' time for refreshments, nearly £70 million a year. All you can really say about that, I suppose, is that at least they didn't allow any officers' time for dogging. Well, we've stopped filming in front of Scotland Yard and come down onto College Green in front of Parliament again. And we've done that for one very simple reason. I've been moved on by the police. They've stopped me filming in front of Scotland Yard on the grounds that it is a sensitive area. In fact, I've become the first of Doughty Street's citizen journalists to be subject to a stop and search. And I have the paperwork here that the police filled in. It took them nearly 20 minutes. And it is a very precise illustration of the problem we have with the police. Do I look like a terrorist? Well, I may look like a terrorist, of course, because they're not allowed to do that profiling stuff anymore. But the experience that I've just had is precisely the kind of experience that more and more ordinary law-abiding people have when they come into contact with the police. Meanwhile, real crime continues to go through the roof. Let's remind ourselves of some of the numbers. According to official Home Office statistics, since 1980, the number of serious wounding offences has quadrupled, as has the number of robbery offences. The number of recorded rapes has increased 11 times since 1980. Whatever our politicians and the Home Office may tell us about the fantasy numbers they cook up in the British Crime Survey, the reality of the crime we actually worry about, particularly violent crime on our streets, is that it is going through the roof. But as we said earlier, detection rates are actually falling through the floor. The detection rate in London, the detection rate of the Metropolitan Police, who have just moved me on, is less than 15%, 15%. Not all of it is the responsibility of the police, of course. A lot of the responsibility rests with our politicians, who, among other things, keep dreaming up streams of crazy new crimes. Tony Blair's government has introduced a new crime for every day he's been in power, including such lunacies as the crime of selling a grazed squirrel. But the police do seem to conduct themselves in some very bizarre ways. Take a couple of recent stories from the press. Take the North Wales Police, where the Chief Constable has just ordered police dogs to be muzzled in case they bite any of the thugs they're meant to be chasing. They're going to have to use headbutts instead. That's the same Chief Constable, incidentally, who spent a ton of taxpayers' money attempting to prosecute Anne Robinson and Tony Blair for anti-Welsh remarks. Or take the Cheshire Police, whose idea of heading off an armed robbery was to park an empty police car down the road. Needless to say, it failed. Or the tragic case of Tanya Moore, whose murder Derbyshire Police failed to prevent because they preferred to assign 40 officers to a chicken rustling case instead. Or the even worse case of Peter Woodhams, who was murdered by the same gang that had previously stabbed him, largely because, despite repeated and desperate pleas from his family, the Metropolitan Police failed to investigate the earlier crime. And you know what they said? They apologised for, quote, any hurt they'd caused. We taxpayers are sick and tired of our police treating us as the criminals while they allow real criminals literally to get away with murder on our streets. There is no magic solution, but a key step forward will be to introduce locally elected sheriffs so that the police once again become accountable to the citizens and not to their paymasters in Whitehall.